Prof said Landry died of hate, that self-hate kind that everybody, meaning everybody human, seemed to have. He said that's also why so many laughed. Me, I don't know. Could have been that. But it could have been because that was his last good shirt he was wearing. He tore it where everybody was always tearing them, on the lower belt. He was working point on our side of the slag line, trying to poke loose a clod that had gotten stuck on the runners in between belts. It was jumpy duty trying to reach in between there, what with the upper going one way, carrying the war cubes, and the lower dragging the slag back the other, and all the time watching that the tip of your slag pipe didn't get snatched into the gears. We were always a lot more scared of the upper, since it was head high and all, and I imagine that's what Landry was doing, watching out for his eyes, because he had his head sucked down so tight into his shoulders that he edged tummy first into the lower edge. A prong snagged his shirt and tore the whole front of it loose just like that. No big deal, really. We had all had that happen to us working point, and it wasn't like he was hurt himself. It was just a shirt. I figured he would just cuss and kick like everybody else, but he didn't. He went nuts. First he let out this scream you could hear from one end of the belt line to the other, over the sound of the scraping pikes, over the voices in the furnace, even over the rattling belts themselves. Then he put a boot on the lower and hopped right up on the upper, kicking cubes off and jabbing his pike into the belt fed. It was funny at first. Everybody stopped scraping and followed along beside him, laughing and cheering and yelling catcalls. The prof, working point back like always because of his age, was closest, and when he cupped his hands and yelled, "Ahab, Landry strikes!" everybody laughed a little louder. Even Landry laughed at that, but I think that was just to make it look like he was less into it than he really was, because he was serious. I could tell. He was all red-faced and puffing like mad, bounding along on the rollers and stepping away like belt fat was his worst enemy, and I'll be damned if he didn't punch a hole clean through. Good 6-inch gas. Everybody cheered like mad then. We screamed and clapped and held our pikes up over our heads and figured that was that. Landry had made his point, but I guess he hadn't, because he didn't even slow down. He just kept on poking and prodding. Made me nervous watching him still at it like that. It got to Prof too, who yelled, "Well done, Landry! A clean kill and a clear victory," while leading another round of applause and just generally trying to wind things up. I don't think Landry even heard him. He kept stabbing away and punched another hole. "Hey, Landry, going for a hot foot?" yelled Bart from beside me while motioning towards the furnace with his pike. Everybody laughed. "Hot head, more like it," popped Avery. "Gonna roast his ass if you don't move it." Most everybody laughed at that too. It was still fun then. About then you could feel the heat. We had already gotten that close. Landry felt it too, but all it did was speed him up. He punched another hole alongside the others. We were starting to see his plan. He was trying to rip holes in a line so as to tear the whole belt loose and jam it up when it went over the hump and across the furnace gears. But there wasn't near enough time. Everybody could see that. Hell, I was surprised that he had done what he'd had. I guess I'd just assumed that since belt fat couldn't burn, it couldn't be ripped. Or maybe I just figured we couldn't touch anything built by Blues. Prof was getting real edgy. "Come on, Landry," he said in a nervous voice. "Enough already. Get off of there." But he was drowned out by a bunch of others yelling stuff like, "Ride him, Landry!" and "Over the hump!" and still laughing. Landry was looking a little frantic, glancing back over his shoulder at the fire all the time, but he didn't stop. He just made another hole. The heat was getting pretty intense. Other people were getting nervous too. The guys shouting, "Jump!" outnumbered the ones shouting, "Ride him!" but not by much. Jack appeared finally, cutting off my view for a second with that huge back of his. He shouldered everybody aside and stuck an arm up to Landry. "Time's up, Landry," he said firmly. Landry recognized that voice. He glanced down briefly. "Just a couple more," he said. Jack was pissed. "One more like hell. You got 10 meters to the hump." Landry glanced quickly back at the glow. "Catch me," he said, still stabbing away. "Bullshit," snapped Jack. "Jump now or burn." "Catch me," said Landry again, stabbing. "Nope, now." Landry sort of erupted. His face got even redder and his voice was so vicious it seemed to be ripping its way out of him. "Suit your damn self then," he snarled and ripped at a gash. Jack stared. Then Landry looked back down again, but different, like he was pleading. And something passed back and forth because Jack suddenly nodded. He even kind of smiled, like the old Jack. Then he trotted on ahead down the steps alongside the hump, scattering people with those big shoulders. He picked a good spot on the safety rail and waited. His face was blank. Everybody crowded down beside him into the heat, leaving him room to reach and all, but not wanting to miss a thing. Some of us were maybe too eager, but damn it, it was exciting, and God knows, it was new. Landry, his face pouring flickering sweat, punched one more hole. That left him with only a couple of inches to go. He tensed for one more thrust. "Landry!" roared Jack, sounding final. That seemed to snap Landry out of it. He looked down, nodded, and dropped his pike right then, just as the belt slid over the hump and down. Landry bent his knees. Jack's giant hands reached up. Landry jumped, only he didn't. I couldn't see for sure. Maybe a pant leg was snagged on the rip, or maybe a boot. Whatever, he was stuck tight. Now I would have screamed like hell, and I think anybody might have at that. But all Landry did was shake his head kind of disgusted like and say, typical. And then he was into that white hot maw. Except for the fire roar, there wasn't a sound. We stood there, stunned, sweating and breathing through our mouths. Jack slowly put down his arms. Then Wallace, a real prick, said, just as well. Somebody would have turned him in for doing it anyway. I felt like hitting him, but I didn't. Nobody did. We just went back to work. At 6:58, 2 minutes before quitting time, the belt snapped. Little Polly was there at the schoolyard fence. Hi, Huey. How you doing, Huey? He yelled to show off for the other 4-year-olds who'd probably get smacked for calling their fathers anything besides Dad or Pop. It made me feel good to see how such a small thing could please him so much, and it was the least I could do. Or maybe the most, seeing as how I still hadn't told him I wasn't his real father. I wasn't going to either. When I picked him up, he snuffled his little face against my chest to get the most cleaner smell out of my overalls. I love cleaner smells, he said like always. Don't you, Huey? Like always, I said I did, but I hated it, like everything else blue. We had to detour around Mall East on the way home. I couldn't see why over the barriers, and Blues never bothered to give reasons. Had to go all the way to Pitt East Square before doubling back. There was a Blue there. He sat in an open hover, looking bored and watching the crowds padding by, a couple of stories or so beneath him. Lots of the crowds were watching him back, except for tapes and the like. Most people had never actually seen one, even after 5 years. He was a big one, even for them. 8.5 feet, easy. Call it 800 or 900 pounds. And all of it that damned baby blue. I shivered a little when I saw him. It wasn't just the size that spooked me, or the color. It wasn't even them, looking so human. Nope. What got to me was them being so goddamn pretty. I had once seen a whole hover load touring the factory, and they hadn't been a single ugly one in the bunch. All gorgeous, all bored, and all naked except for those little skirt things of theirs. Like having the statues roaming around loose in the museum flexing at the tourists. It had scared the hell out of me. It still did. Polly loved them though. Said something about blue being a friendly color and brought a whole slew of pics he had collected, showing Blues playing with smiling human children. Polly ate that up, sitting for hours looking at them spread out on the floor. Sometimes he would trade pics with other kids and deals too complicated for adults to understand. I hated the pics, of course. I had a particularly bad nightmare over the one showing 5 kids sitting astride each bicep. Polly had fallen asleep on my shoulder. I knew he would have wanted me to wake him up for the sight of a real live Blue, but I let him sleep. Didn't even look myself when we passed underneath. Seemed to me we spent too damn much time looking up to them as it was. Still, there was Polly's future to think about. Damn, but I hated to think of my boy as one of those little blue-nosed punks. But if he was going to have it any better than me, what choice was there? It was damn near unheard of to get anywhere without some Blues help. Maybe if you were a genius or some kind of, or the son of one. Polly wasn't either. So to find a decent place in the world, Polly would need to please a Blue. To be a Bluenose, sucking around them and fawning over everything they said or did like house pets. Well, I hoped he'd turn out to be a successful one at least. Bad enough having to crawl without getting anything out of it. But the only thing I had to be glad of was that I didn't need to do that. I couldn't go much further down. So why be a puppy? Of course, Prof said we were all Blue Noses, not just those first traders or the more current slime. Every day we stayed alive under their rule, he said, we'd each get a little more blue here. Said the next generation wouldn't mind a bit. They won't know any better, and besides, most of them will be too busy doing it to think about it. Well, maybe that's good. Better for Paulie not to be ashamed of himself all the time like a lot of folks. And why shouldn't he? Hell, he wasn't even around before. He had nothing to try and forget. But I did. I did forget the world as it was when men still ruled the earth and I was a steel worker instead of a slob that scraped up slag dust for an automated robot. But little Paulie shouldn't mind. He never knew an earth without Blues. He'd get along. No choice. Just the same I knew he hoped like hell he would refuse. I felt ashamed for hoping it because Polly was a good one. Just the same, I knew I hoped like hell he would refuse. I felt ashamed for hoping it because Polly was a good one who deserved more than slag. It wouldn't be fair to let on to him about how I felt. It was a blues earth nowadays, like it or not. Anne elbowed her way through the crowded tables and put the steaming plates down before me. Then she leaned over Polly's side of the booth to wake him up with what they call a butterfly kiss. Polly, playing possum, and with me under strict oath of secrecy, jerked up at the first gentle touch of her eyelashes across his cheek and threw his arms around her neck. Anne shrieked, "You little ambusher," and countered with his most dreaded nemesis, precision tickling. Never remotely equal to that, Polly jumped away to the far side of the booth, giggling madly. "Can't take it, huh?" she challenged, fainting a bit. Polly shook his head wearily, holding his arms to his sides to protect vital areas. She sat down on the edge of the seat. "Miss me, Polly?" she asked, continuing with the next stage of their greeting. Polly shook his head curtly from side to side as always. Pouting, she asked, "Not even a little bit?" Polly shook his head even harder, but a grin had begun to peek out of the corner of his mouth. "Anne!" shouted the manager of the diner. All three of us cringed a little. Anne sighed and stood up, pushing the hair from her eyes. "Eat it all up, you," she ordered Polly. She only said, "Hi, Huey," to me, but as she did, she rested her warm hand on my shoulder. I managed something back and then watched her for days. Even that filthy waitress uniform, she was beautiful. Sometimes I would imagine that Polly's mother had been something like Anne. Willie and Ray from the Slag Dump crew sat down beside me at the bar and started bet talk about tomorrow's games. It seemed that a Blue was supposed to attend in person. Each man had a different opinion about what that meant, easy money-wise. They ended up betting 2 credits, not on the results of the events, but on whether or not a certain event, the choice of 3, would be held at all. "Ain't no way," said Willie, "that anybody's be dumb enough to sign up for that. Hell, it's bad enough facing 3 locals one after another, but trained blue steamers? Shit." "Somebody'll chance it," replied Ray. "The price is just too tempting." "What tempting?" "It's the same as always. 10 credits if you live, and your choice of opponents after. Same as any Sunday." "But a Blue's gonna be there, Willie, and he'll have that slimy little Bluenose mayor sniffing around him. Even that pig mayor will have to fight a 3-winner if he's challenged, and who wouldn't like to match that little squat?" "Damn it, Ray. Ain't gonna be no 3-winner, 'cause there ain't nobody around can beat 3 blue teamers back to back." "Wait a minute. I didn't say they'd win. I'd say they'd try is all." "Not even that." "We'll see." "Damn right." I wondered if either one of those 2 experts had ever so much as considered actually entering the games. Not likely. Not even single duel, much less choice of 3. I'd thought about it once, years ago, before Paulie. I entered single duel, but chickened at the ramp. Did learn one thing, though. Willie and Ray were stupid to think it had anything to do with guts. It had to do with being too tired. Suddenly I remembered that Landry had told me he was going to fight tomorrow. I wonder if that's what his typical was all about. Our bunch started wandering in. I waved and talked a bit and drank. Of course, getting the most of my one night a week. Polly slept soundly in my arms, unaffected by the swirling Saturday night blabber. Later on, Prof, on the stool beside me, leaned forward against the bar and raised one finger in that actor's way he's got when spouting beer talk, meaning blue talk. What could the president have done? He had no real power. I don't remember who he was talking to except that he was fat. Huh? He replied, "The president of the United States was the most powerful dude in the whole world." "Then why," asked Prof, "did the Blues kick him out to make do like the rest of us?" "'Cause he wouldn't sell out to those blue bastards like those other greedy bums. He was too straight to do that." "Nonsense," replied Prof pleasantly. "Fact is, the president had nothing." "Then why didn't they kill him like the others who refused?" He was too big for that?" Prof laughed. "My dear fellow, no. No president of our choosing has been that big since the 19th century. No, the president was simply ignored. I doubt that he suspected much more than the rest of us suckers. Remember all those lovely rose garden toasts about the brotherhood of the stars? He was just as gullible as the rest of us. He even made that pitiful speech about sending airstrikes and if the blue ships didn't stop landing." Prof sighed. "I don't think he realized even then that it was all over." That was Prof's basic Saturday night. His theory was that the Blues grabbed up the really powerful handful of men and women who actually ran the world. They snatched them months before anyone else ever heard of the Blues. Then they offered them the moon in return for aiding the inevitable, but not necessarily bloody, blue takeover. Prof figured the two meteors that struck about that time were really demonstrations of blue muscle to help prove their point to the captives, plus the obvious threat. So, Prof would say, they sold us out, Huey. They spread the word that the blues were mankind's big break while dismantling our armies and communication systems. That's how they took over so fast, Huey. It's the only way they could have. You can't enslave an entire planet overnight without a lot of busy nights beforehand. I said I still didn't buy it. Those folks could have done something. They could have faked it on the ships, then spread the alarm when they got back to Earth. Prof would smile at this. Why, Huey? To ensure even more humans killed? It'd been worth it to beat them. Us? Beat blue ships and blue weapons? Well, we might have. We might. But those powerful few didn't believe we could. In fact, I imagine they truly believed that they were helping Earth. They were making the best of the inevitable. Best is right, I said sourly. Look at those bastards living good. Only the icing, Huey. But probably the deciding factor at that. If mankind is sure to lose, why must all men lose? I would always steam a bit then, knowing it figured that way, not liking it. I once asked Prof straight out, do you think we had a chance to stop him? I don't know, Huey. I just don't know. Probably not. Still, I insisted stubbornly, we should have tried. We fucking sure should have. When I looked quickly over at Prof, I saw he was looking away into the distance with a pair of eyes that looked dead as hell. When Prof would talk like that, it made me wonder about who he had been before and about how come he was working slackline with the rest of us when he was so smart and all. Was he hiding? Was he one of those people who were offered so much to betray us? And did he refuse? Tell him to shove it? Whenever his eyes and voice did that hard trick of his, I wondered about that. But I never asked him. Nobody did. Those days, what difference did it make? Anne came in, still wearing her waitress uniform. Nobody had dress-up clothes anymore, of course, except for Bluenoses, but it seemed tougher on women. Jack wasn't with her for some reason. She searched the room a bit for him, then headed toward me. She smiled that smile she had that always made me sit up straight, then took the stool beside mine. For just a second I pretended that there was no Polly in my lap and that she'd come over to be with me. She sighed a small sigh of fatigue and gently stroked Polly's brow. Still fast asleep, he clamped a tiny hand around one of her fingers. She looked up to see if I had seen it. I looked away in a hurry, embarrassed at what I'd been thinking. I could feel her watching me. Probably she knew. Who could guess? Where's Jack? I asked, covering up. I don't know. He's supposed to meet me. Hasn't he been here? Not tonight. Come to think of it, I haven't seen him in here in 4 or 5 Saturdays. Funny. She managed to shrug and nod and look beautiful all at once. Something's wrong, Huey. I know there is. Something's happened to get to him. I told her about what had happened to Landry that morning. That seemed like part of it. Yeah, she said in a voice so low I could barely hear her. I think I could. But this has been going on quite a while. Almost as if... Huey? What was he like before? Was he very different? I laughed. God, yes, I said and thought back, remembering how he had been at first, how much he had meant to all of us. Jack Crow was the best guy to know and work with that anybody's ever seen, Anne. Always so damn friendly and cheerful and, I don't know, positive. He could warm up the air 3 feet around just grinning. For working guys like us, it was a big deal to be around somebody like that, even before. He had everything. Looks, smarts, 10-ton muscles. He could have done anything he wanted to, you know? She nodded, smiling, but she didn't know what it had meant to us to know that he had picked our profession, our factory, our life. The man loved being a steel worker. He was proud as hell of it. That made us proud too, glowing. Inside of a month he was every man's hero, mine too, and never ashamed, I blurted, laughing back. I beg your pardon? Asked Anne, confused. That was it with Jack. That was the whole deal, really. Once somebody asked him what his philosophy of life was, and you know what he said? He said, I ain't ashamed. Most of the guys thought he was just fooling around. And he sort of was. But he said it dead straight, Anne. Damn, bet he wasn't more than 18 at the time. Anne looked a little startled. 18? But it's only been 8 years, hasn't it, since he's been here? Huey, he looks 40. Yeah, he took it bad, Anne. Couldn't believe it had happened without anyone even, you know. She nodded. She knew. We all knew. I went on. He took off a couple of months later, gone over a year. It looked a lot different when he came back. I caught myself unnecessarily shifting Polly's position, stopped it. He didn't joke anymore, even talk sometimes. Other times he'd get real mad all of a sudden, like, and hurt people. He never did that before. Her right forefinger, incredibly soft, rose to fit into my face and fingered my scar, the big one where the jawbone had poked through. Maybe Jack confused her. Was there anything she didn't know about me? But you don't hate him for it, do you, Huey? No. You still care about him. You always have. Yeah. Even after. Yeah. Even then. Why, Huey? I shrugged. Said, I don't know. And I didn't. Not then. There was a sudden, bone-jarring crash as the double doors burst open half off their hinges, and there stood Jack, drunk and swaying between them. And he was covered from head to toe with slag dust. He looked awful. As he stomped loudly across the room, I saw that his face was pale gray, underneath that grimy coating of slag dust and sweat. His eyes were blood red with what could have been just sadness and fatigue, but made me think of panic. When he pounded his fist on the bar for service, he splattered its surface with fat drops of blood. Anne gasped when she saw the nasty gash on his wrist and reached out to cradle his hand. My God, Jack, what happened? Your hand, your clothes. He pulled his hand out of her reach with an awkward jerk. He patted his filthy pants with it. So what, woman? That's just slag dust. Part of the job I do. Part of my valuable service to God and the blues. What, are you ashamed of being seen with a slag scraper? No, Jack, she said quietly. Good for you. I ain't ashamed either. I love being a scrap iron janitor. Anything to help. His beer appeared on the bar. He grabbed it, downed it with one gulp, his elbow shoved against the guy beside him. Jack spun, growling. His face got taut, his fist shot up. He held himself. Barely. He didn't kill the guy. Didn't even hit him somehow. Instead, he just leaned against the bar, both hands clamped tightly to the cushion. He looked at his feet, breathing deeply and trembling. Jack, said Anne gently, let me take you home and get you. Hell no, woman, he said, standing up straight. I got business here. He pounded his fist on the bar again. Announcement, fellow janitors. His bellow turned every eye in the room to him. A toast to our former foreman, Landry. He gave his life today just for the hell of it. Drink to his memory. I took a small sip. I don't know how many others drank. Probably everybody. Jack drained half his second beer with one swallow. Then he saw that everybody was watching him. So how the hell are you, gentlemen? On this fine Saturday night? Been gone a while myself, but everything looks like before. Same pale faces, same bad beer, same stupid, worthless arguments too, I bet. Huh, Prof? Anything different this time? Not a thing, Jack, Prof said evenly. That figures. Glad to have you back, though, Prof continued. Where you been? You know goddamn well where I've been, Prof. Jack looked at him then, really looked at someone for the first time. And Prof looked right back, right into pain. I've been at the slag burner, Prof. Where the hell else can a man get to be this way? What else but that stinking blue rat hole would vomit such filth on a human being? Anne tried to grab him again to stop him, to end the agony of it, but he pushed her away. He stalked over to the biggest empty table in the middle of the room. He grabbed the edge of it with one hand and dragged it over to the bar, scattering chairs and pieces of fractured mugs. He plopped down on it and stared at Prof from no more than a couple of feet away. At the far booths, conversations lamely shuffled ahead. Nobody wanted to hear. Don't you know why I went back, Prof? Well, don't you? Don't you all? His voice cracked. He was pleading. Anne turned away. Yes, Jack, Prof said at last. Tell us why. For Landry, of course, for his slag pipe. He dropped it under the belt, just before it burned him alive. Got real quiet. Dead still in the whole place. And Jack started to cry. I was going to rip it out of there, Prof. You know, Huey? Rip it out of there and bust the shit out of everything doing it, too. I was going to strip those gears, Prof. I was going to bash the whole assembly right into the concrete. He broke off suddenly with a sob, dropped his mug, covered his face with his hands, his back heaved. Just when I knew I wasn't going to be able to take it one more second, the whimpering stopped and Jack lifted his head. He looked worse than ever. Tears poured from his eyes, making tiny pink lines across his blood-smeared cheek.
His voice was small for him, too small, damn it. I couldn't get it out. I tried. I tried with all I could, all my everything, and I'm strong, Prof. I know, Jack, whispered Prof. Jack lifted one of those huge arms and rested his hands on Prof's shoulder and looked him in the eye and needed, God, how he needed, an answer. Prof, how could he do such a thing? How could we get so excited about it? Prof, how? Is throwing it away the only use we got left? And then he fell. Tears and muscles and need and pain, all of it slid to the floor. It took forever. Polly stirred in my arms. He moaned and stuck his little hands inside my shirt. But he didn't wake up. I took a wet napkin and wiped a drop of blood from his cheek. Prof stood holding Polly while I helped Anne get his clothes off. Then we both stood and watched while she dabbed away at the ground with a damp rag. Goddamn blues, I muttered for something to say. It's not the blues, replied Anne calmly, just as if we'd really been talking. He could take that, I think. It's us, said Prof, simply. Huh? She turned to me. He loves us so much, Huey. Sure, I said uncertainly. I know that. Not just the three of us, all of us. People, dear, all the... Man, said Prof flatly. He loves man. We despise ourselves, but he loves us still. He sighed. It's killing him. Anne began to weep quietly. I didn't like any of this. Aw, he'll be okay, Annie. You'll see. I knelt down and put a clumsy arm around her shoulders. He'll cheer up, I said. She turned her face to look at me, those soft eyes peering and pleading like Jack's, and said, How? I took Polly's fingers out of his mouth and put his arms back around under the covers. Then I gave him a pat on the bottom for luck before climbing out onto the fire escape next to Prof. We lit cigarettes and opened beer. It was very late. Only one person was out, an old man. We watched him hurry down the sidewalk and across the street without looking at anything but a moving spot a couple of steps ahead. He disappeared a few seconds out of the lone street light on the next block. And then the streets were completely empty, dark, quiet, cold. Maybe he hadn't been all that old after all. He'll get better, won't he, Prof? Jack is dying, Huey, he replied without looking at me. Aw, come on, Prof. He's dying, like all the rest of us, but sooner and worse, because he sees it happening. I couldn't stand this anymore. Look, Prof, things aren't so great, but... He cut me off cold. Why didn't we fight them, Huey? Why didn't we fight? He still wasn't looking in my direction. Huh? 'Cause it was all over, wasn't it? He turned to me at last. Was it? Or did we just let it go? Oh, God, Huey. Are we so puny that we'd just let it go? I didn't have a damn thing to say to that. I just sat there. After a while, he went on. We didn't fight. We said it was over and cursed the Bluenoses and blamed it all on them, but we didn't fight. We groveled to them for everything, hating ourselves when we do it, hating others more for doing it better and getting more, and still we grovel. Hate. For the traitors, for the rest of the Bluenoses, for ourselves. So much hate, Huey. Well, what happened to the hate for the Blues? Where's that? Shit, Prof, I replied, surprised. Everybody hates them. Do you, Huey? Why? Because they won? Because we lost to them? Hell yeah, both. But tell me, Huey, do you trust them? Do I what? Trust them. Do you believe what they say? I don't know. I guess so. I never heard of them lying to anybody. What about us, though? What about a neighbor? Could you trust him not to lie to you? Or worse, to maybe turn you in for extra liquor credits if he caught you? Just a damn minute, you... It happens, Huey, he said gently. I looked at him. I sighed. I know. We all know. We don't trust ourselves anymore, Huey. We haven't since that day when the Blues took control and we all looked around to see who was fighting back, and do you know what we saw? Ourselves. Our own cowardly selves looking back and waiting for someone else to make the first move. But damn it, it's the Blues, I shouted, hating this. Prof ignored me. Huey, haven't you ever wondered why the games are so popular? What? I tried to calm myself, still feeling rotten. I thought about his question. People are bored and, I don't know, kind of tense all week, and so they decide to kill one another on Sundays? No, Huey, not tense, furious, enraged, hating that neighbor we don't trust. That's why we go to the games. We go to see those bastards suffer for what they did and didn't do, and something else for what we did and didn't do. A little bit of each fan, Huey, is there to see himself killed. But, well, Rome had the games and they weren't. Rome was the capital of the world. Her games, even the minor ones, were the ultimate in spectacle. Ours are nothing more than shoddy little slaughters held in any parking lot or pig pen available. It's not spectacle. It's not sport. It's self-abuse. God damn us, Huey. Why didn't we fight back? Why don't we now? I blinked. Now? We wouldn't have a chance. So what? Came to me out of nowhere, halfway through the second year, just when I had thought the worst was past me. I was still down, of course, going every day to a factory run for the Blues by their machines that had always been run by men, by me. But I did it. 6 days a week I did it. I cleaned up after the blue machines, and if I felt we were all like cattle sometimes, I just gritted my teeth and told myself to hang in there, that I would get used to it. By halfway through the second year, I thought I had. Not happy. Day to day and head down and holding on. Saturday night, got cleaned, got all my credits. It was a chilly, beautiful night, and I put on my very best clothes. Went down my sidewalk and into the door of the pharmacy on the corner I'd always passed before. 3 boxes of sleeping pills, half my credits. It was windy when I got back outside. I went into the alley to die warm. Polly was there. He was wrapped in a brown army blanket and an old shirt. His bed was a pile of old magazines wadded up in the center of an old tire. He was about gone. Polly was there. He was wrapped in a brown army blanket and an old shirt. His bed was a pile of old magazines wadded up in the center of an old tire. He was about one. He was smiling. A note pinned to the blanket said, "This is my dear little dad," before I stopped reading. I picked him up and walked away, leaving the pills, the blanket, and the note. It started raining on the way home, so I held them inside my shirt, against my skin, all the way. I dreamed my hand was caught in the lower belt. I was going to scream, but I woke up instead. Something still had me by the middle finger of my left hand. "Company! Company's here!" chirped Polly. I opened one eye and sighted down my arm slowly, not wanting to lose my balance, and there stood my bright-eyed, sadistic child, gleefully yanking my knuckle with both hands. "Hi, Huey! Company's here!" I groaned, burped, looked at the clock. 10 a.m. Sunday-wise, it was dawn. Polly dropped my hand and scooted out of sight, saying, "I'll get him," over his shoulder. I started to call to him, but gave it up. I rolled back over instead. I had a special hangover and knew it couldn't happen to me. Polly didn't drink. He bounced back into the room, dragging Prof by the coat. "It's Prof!" he yelped happily. I started to growl something, but Prof cut me off. "Sorry to wake you, Huey, but I wanted to catch you before you went to the games." I mumbled something about not going to the games. He looked surprised. He sat down on the edge of the bed. "Don't you go to the games?" "Not for a couple of years now." "Really? What'd you want?" "I wanted to say goodbye." That woke me up. I sat up, stared at him. I reached out blindly for a cigarette. Polly handed me the pack. I thanked him, patted him on the head, still not taking my eyes off Prof. He looked different. He looked tired, of course, since he obviously hadn't been to bed yet. But he was holding it well. His eyes were bright and clear. His white hair was combed back over his ears with a flourish. He was excited. More than that, he was determined. I knew already seeing him, but I asked anyway, "Will you be back?" "Nope." I nodded. "We'll miss you." He smiled at that. "And I'll miss you too," he said, reaching out and mussing Polly's hair affectionately. I sat and smoked while he roughhoused a bit with Polly. Then he smiled at me again. "Tell everybody," he said. I nodded again. "You leaving now?" "This afternoon." I nodded again. I didn't know what to say. Or at least, I knew what to say, but not how to say it. But I wanted to tell him. I wanted to try. I tried to speak, but there was a lump in my throat and my eyes were getting hot. "I know," he said suddenly. He patted me on the leg. His eyes were shining too. He stood up. We shook hands. And then he was gone. "Where's Prof going?" Polly wanted to know. "To fight," I replied, which was true. I didn't say to die, but that was just as true. "Oh," said Polly. He didn't understand, but at least he had an answer, which was the main thing. He went off to play. I tried to go back to sleep, but I kept seeing Prof when he shook my hand. And I kept seeing him on the fire escape the night before. I could hear Polly in the next room and the people laughing and staring in the building and on the street. I wanted to get up and go see Prof and talk to him, but I knew I didn't have anything to say. I dozed. When I woke up, it was almost noon. For some reason, I thought of the game starting in about an hour. And then for some other reason, or maybe the same one, I had a huge desire to go. I sat up. I hadn't been to the games in years. Hadn't wanted to, but all of a sudden, I couldn't miss it. The Goldbergs were great people with a little girl who was sweet on Polly. Polly would gripe, but I knew he loved spending time playing with her toys and pretending not to be interested. Only the Goldbergs weren't home. Craig offered to take Polly, but his family was always so sad-looking, even for a sad building. I thought of Anne. She opened the door, looking bright and cheerful and lovely. She did her bit with Polly and then sent him off to the kitchen, goody hunting. I asked about Jack. Her eyes clouded briefly. Then she smiled. Mr. Crow was feeling much better this morning, thank you. He was up an hour ahead of me. She glanced at me, saw my question. We didn't discuss last night. Didn't really talk at all before he was dressed and gone. Where'd he go? She shrugged delicately. A mystery. He didn't say. Just kissed me hard and spanked me by out there on the stoop, right out in front of God and everybody. I grinned. You think he's okay then? She averted her gaze. I told you how he was. I couldn't leave it be. You know what I mean, Anne. Do you think he's going to get over it? She looked at me. She was smiling, but it was a struggle. He hasn't got a prayer, she said calmly, and went into the kitchen after Polly. I left the two of them together a few minutes later. I didn't mention Prof. The arena took up an entire city block and held almost 10,000 people. It was one of the biggest in the area because it was a big city and because we had a pretty good local team. The building had a bus depot before. It still looked like it, I guess. But it always reminded me of one of those old Mexican bullfighting rings. The faded wooden fence that ran all the way around it was covered with posters of local fighters. And the front entrance was made up of 4 arched tunnels surrounded by fluttering pennants and rows of vendors hawking homemade snacks from homemade carts. The way we were herded in there with our shabby clothes and the vendors screaming looked like something that should have taken place 100 years before with different people. I recognized a few of the people around me in the mob. It was a crowd like any sports crowd, but more eager, more anxious, definitely happier. Everyone around me always seemed to be laughing going into the games. They were happier than ever today. It was bright and sunshiny, which helped, but more than that, a blue was there. I got a good seat. I was about 15 rows up the first tier and right in the middle so I could see both the gate and the Bluenose box with no sweat. It wasn't called the Bluenose box. It was called the reserved section, and supposedly anybody could sit there who was willing to spend the credits. But nobody but a Bluenose was rich enough, no matter how willing. Everybody in the bleachers always hated everybody in there. Especially today when only the bluest nosed people in the city were there, showing off their wealth and position and easiness around the blue. They laughed and chattered and smoked cigars. Their women flashed jewelry and pretty teeth. Not one of them took his eyes off the huge chair in the center of the box, or off the giant who so easily filled it, because nobody, Bluenose or otherwise, was really easy around one of them. But then I realized that it was the same Blue I'd seen in his hover car the day before. He sat in his chair the same way too, huge, serene, uninterested, my every fear. The mayor, sitting beside him, just like Ray had said, stood up and went to the mic. He introduced the blue, and then the gate opened and the fighters marched out. First came the home team, then the only 2 independent entrants, then the guest entry, the blue team. They were really something, those blue teamers. Only one of the 9 was average sized. The rest of them towered over the other fighters. Everything about them was intimidating, from their highly polished swords to their deep blue tunics, and I wouldn't have been surprised if the entire local bunch had run away right then. Too bad they didn't. After the usual ceremony, the mayor announced the opening match. 3 home teamers versus 3 blue teamers. The blue teamers saluted their boss and waited. The home teamers took every second allowed, checking over each other's weapons and psyching themselves up. By the time the match started, the locals were higher than kites. They all but flew forward. It was a slaughter, and a quick one. I don't think the blue team suffered a scratch among them. The crowd cheered just the same, with individual fans spouting some shit about how you couldn't knock talent like that no matter what side it was on. The blue teamer saluted and disappeared through the gate. The crew came out to haul off the bodies and spread new sand in the circle. Then the mayor announced the next match, single combat, blue teamer versus independent entrant. The poor local was so scared that his sword shook. He circled the blue teamer, a big red-headed man twice his size, several times before flinging himself forward, swinging and shouting. He died, beheaded, without striking a single blow. Still, there was applause. I understood then what Prof had meant. I felt the hate from the man beside me, from the woman in front of me. Hate for the blue teamers, for the mayor, for the crowd, for ourselves, for being there in the first place. Prof was wrong, too, because I hated the blues just as much, this one anyway, who sat there being bored by dying men. It only took one man and a handful of sand to clean up. The mayor announced that the next match would be just like the last, single combat, blue teamer versus the other independent entrant. Second local man had seen what had happened to the first. He marched to the center of the ring without glancing at his opponent. He took a deep breath, saluted formally, and tried to back down. There was quite a bit of laughter. A couple of people jeered, but no one offered to take his place. The scum mayor didn't even bother to hide his amusement when he informed the local that, since no one else was willing to fight in his place, the match would continue as announced. The local, a dark, lean kid about 20, didn't move. The mayor repeated himself and ordered the kid to fight. The kid still didn't move. The mayor looked nervously at the blue, who was showing no more interest than before, then ordered the blue teamer to attack. "Please," the kid begged, his voice strident with youth and terror. "Please, sir." He raced across the ring and stood trembling right beneath the box. He was talking to the blue. We couldn't hear his voice from there, but we knew what he was doing. He was crying. The blue stared blankly down at him for several seconds, long enough to give the kid some hope. But then he looked away and gestured casually, for the blue teamer to get on with it. "No!" screamed the kid when he heard the footsteps behind him. He staggered to his feet. He threw himself against a wall beneath the box. He sobbed loudly. He stretched his arms over his head towards the blue, beseeching pitifully. The blue ignored him. He didn't even look down. The blue teamer started forward again. When he got within a few steps, the kid screamed and ran. The blue teamer was right behind him. The kid flew towards the crowd barrier. Just before he got there, he tripped. He was too terrified, I guess, to pull himself back to his feet. Instead, he tried to crawl through the barrier, through the railing. He got stuck, or maybe he just froze. But when the blue teamer stood over him at last, he didn't move. The sword, shining brightly, rose to strike. The crowd tensed forward. The kid screamed in horror. And Jack Crow, seated less than 3 meters away on the very first row, stood up and said, "Hold it." The blue teamer froze, and like every other living creature in the place, looked at Jack. "Who the hell are you?" growled the fighter. Jack stepped up to the barrier and faced him. "Step away from him," he replied calmly, firmly. The blue teamer's eyes flicked toward the box and then back to Jack. "And if I don't?" Jack's voice was dead flat. "It will hurt," he said. Jack was bigger, a lot bigger, and he meant it. The two of them stared back and forth from a foot away, the kid lying forgotten between them. And then, with a snarl of raging hatred, the blue teamer swung out with his sword. Jack's rock-like fist slammed him right between the eyes with a sound like a big truck hitting a big tree. The blue teamer was 2 meters away before he hit the ground. Jack stepped over the barrier and strode towards him. The blue teamer got halfway to his feet before Jack hit him again. It sounded worse the second time. Jack strode forward again, grabbed hold of an ankle and the collar of the blue tunic, and threw the man against the gate. The crowd, stunned before, began to murmur. There was scattered applause. The mayor leapt to his feet and grabbed the mic. "What do you think you're doing?" he snapped. Jack turned slowly and faced him across the width of the ring. "That's one," he said bluntly. The crowd gasped around me. They saw it instantly. The mayor was a little slower. "What was that?" "That was one," repeated Jack in a cold, clear voice. The mayor understood it now. He glared at Jack threateningly. Jack met his gaze calmly. "Very well, whoever you are," said the mayor at last. "Very well." The mayor touched a switch on the console before him. The gate opened seconds later. Another blue teamer appeared, looking like he had just thrown his gear together. The fighter paused when he saw his teammate lying still in the sand. He muttered something to someone inside, and a couple of the guys from the crew appeared to drag the first man away. Then he turned his attention to Jack. "You do this?" he asked, gesturing over his shoulder to the busy crewman. Jack snorted disgustedly. "You see anybody else?" He walked over and picked up the first man's sword, then stepped to the center of the ring and waited. The mayor introduced the blue teamer as Garrison, then asked for Jack's name. Jack gave it to him without comment. Equally casual, the mayor described the circumstances of the match along with Jack's price, should he win. Then he offered Garrison 100 credits for a quick victory and sat down. The people in the crowd looked at one another. Jack's price was only 10 credits. "Typical," muttered somebody beside me, who couldn't have known why I stared at him. The match began. Garrison began immediately to circle Jack, testing his opponent with sharp jabs and twisting feints. Jack, no swordsman but no idiot either, crouched low, keeping his blade on Garrison all the while. Seeing Jack's inexperience made Garrison cocky. He began to toy with the end of Jack's sword, not bothering yet to go for the kill. When Jack tried his only clumsy lunge, Garrison laughed and parried all at the same time, flipping blade against blade with offhand, insultingly deliberate expertise. He never saw Jack's left coming until it had his sword arm by the wrist, but then it was too late. He was jerked forward helplessly, groin first, against Jack's upsurging boot. Moaning horribly, sword flying, Garrison catapulted up and back through the air before crashing sideways onto the sand, where he lay gasping with his hands between his legs. Jack picked him up and threw him halfway through the gate with a thunderous din of splintering plywood slats. "That's two," he said simply. The crowd exploded into wild cheering and deafening applause that went on a long time. "Just one more to go," I heard several people shout. Then they would point to the mayor and drag their fingers happily across their throats. There was no doubt in their minds as to who Jack would pick to fight if he could beat the third and last man. They could already picture the most hated of all Bluenoses crawling. I guess the mayor could see it too. He spent a long time on the phone to somebody behind the gate. He looked like he was furious with whomever he was talking to. Mostly, though, he looked scared. He wouldn't look at Jack, who stood staring at him from the center of the ring. The mayor's long consultation was worth it. The guy who finally came out was a for-real giant. He was huge, bald, and carrying the biggest sword I'd ever seen. The crowd got quiet in a hurry. Seen in a second that the last blue teamer was a good 3 inches taller than Jack, and maybe 30 pounds heavier. This was going to be a lot different. It was. Jack almost died in the first 5 minutes. The giant had beaten him back so quickly that he lost his balance and fell against the barrier. Jack must have banged his head against one of the bars or something, because he just sat there for a second without moving. Then he shook his head and looked up in time to see all his enemies smiling. All his enemies. Not just the bald giant rushing forward to kill him, and not just the mayor leaning forward with eager, beady eyes. The blue was smiling too. I don't know if anybody else even noticed, but I saw it, and Jack sure as hell did, I know. It was a vicious, cunning smile. A slight curl of a great blue mouth on a great blue face. It was unforgettable. It scared me. It made Jack mad. He was something horrible when he got back to his feet. He wailed away at the giant with wild, swooping swings that ended in ear-splitting clangs and bursts of sparks. The giant was off balance for good after the first collision. Jack's blows were just too powerful, and it came too fast for the giant to have a chance to do anything but block them. Jack could have gotten him in the first 10 seconds if he hadn't kept doing the same thing over and over. He didn't try to change his tactics, though. He just pounded away at the giant's head, blow after blow. Maybe Jack didn't know what else to do. Or maybe he just didn't care about doing anything else but smashing that bald head. Maybe killing the guy wasn't enough. Maybe he had to crush him. He did just that. He backed him against a wall beside the gate. He battered him to his knees, and then kept on and on until he had broken the giant's guard, then his sword, then his arm. Jack didn't stop, didn't even slow down, until that huge bald head was a fractured, splintered mess. It was a bad thing to see. Too bad, in fact, for the crowd. They were too stunned to cheer. They just stared. Jack snapped out of it a few seconds later. He dropped his sword on the body and whirled to face the box. Then he stalked across the sand to a spot just below the mayor and stood there, hands on his hips, smiling a cold black smile. "I'll give you 500 credits to pick somebody else," said the mayor in a nervous, trembling voice. That woke the crowd up. They laughed. 1,000! Up the mayor, when Jack didn't react. The crowd laughed some more at that, and even more when the bid went to 2,000, then 5,000, then 8,500. It's all I have, implored the mayor, and the laughter peaked. Jack laughed too at that. He laughed as he held out his hand, and laughed as the money was counted out, and laughed as he tucked it away in his belt and walked off. He stopped laughing abruptly when he looked at us. He stopped our laughter too, with a blazing glare of withering disgust. Looking and feeling like scolded children, we settled down at once and waited while he stood at the barrier and scanned back and forth across our faces. It was no better when he finished his examination and laughed again. It wasn't a pleasant sound. So who is it, you want to know, huh? Who's next, right? Whom do I choose now? We cringed under his incredibly brutal, angry tone. Who indeed? He said and spat into the sand between his feet. When he lifted his head back up, his face was red with blind, uncontrollable rage. Who? I'll tell you who! He shrieked. He spun around back toward the box and pointed a shaking finger dead center at it and shouted, You! You blue motherfucker! You! Get your blue ass down here and fight! No one spoke. No one moved. No one breathed. For what seemed like a long time, the blue just sat there, coldly eyeing Jack. Then he stood up, all 8.5 feet of him, and vaulted over the box wall onto the sand. And without hesitation, it began. Something big happened then. Something more important than anything else. It started when Jack pointed at the blue. It faded a little when we saw that the blue was really going to fight. But it shot back up when, after a blue-fisted blow that would have killed a steer, Jack got back up. Still, no one spoke. Not then. Not yet. But we moved with his every move. Jack's fists were mirrored thousands of times by our own as they struck the enemy time and time again. We all ducked beneath that tremendous hurtling forearm, and we all gasped when it made its shuddering impact. But only Jack felt the awesome concussion. Only Jack felt the pain. Only Jack fell sprawling onto the sands, and bleeding visibly, got up a second time. So astonished by this was the blue that he left completely unprepared for attack. Jack's thundering roundhouse right actually knocked the enemy back. Our cheering, our screaming, our hoping, they all started at that instant. And through it all, our love for Jack, our heartbreaking affection for him, never dimmed. It took the blue almost half an hour to kill Jack. Even as bad as he looked then, covered with blood and bruises, his shattered collarbone jutting horribly, we thought he might still get up. And for a full minute, we waited, unmoving, for that very thing to happen. The blue waited with us, but Jack never moved again. So then we knew it was over. What had to be was. The blue had won like we all knew he had to, and Jack was dead, and okay, we're impressed and leaving quietly. We made ready to go. The blue was going to leave too, but before he did, he gave Jack's body one last contemptuous kick. We rose. We were screaming. We were surging forward. The barrier collapsed beneath our mass. For several moments, all became blurred until we were cheering again and dancing in the sand. Some of us hugged one another. Others held pieces of the blue high over their heads and laughed. Nothing else in my life could match it. Nothing could even come close. Not Jack, not Anne, not even Polly. We were all so goddamn proud to learn that even we, cowards and Bluenoses all, had a limit. Soon, too soon, the jubilation ended and the fear returned. People began leaving quickly. I found Jack's body beside the barrier right where the kid had lain in panic. What had happened to him? Or did it really matter? I looked at his face, holding it between my hands for several moments. Then I released him and kissed his bloody forehead. I found the fortune still folded inside his belt. I kissed him again. For once, I knew just what to do. I headed home. Anne took one look at me and gasped. I didn't move, didn't speak while she searched my eyes. Jack? She asked at last. He was great, I replied. Prof was just leaving when the three of us arrived at his place. I thought I might have to persuade him to let us come along, or at least tell him what happened, but one look at my excited face was all he needed. He clamped a hand on my shoulder, kissed Anne, and offered to carry Polly the first 100 miles. We are never completely safe, not even here, for the jungle can both kill and feed. Though it hides us, it also swallows us. And always the blues circling above. They caught us last night when we crossed the Negro. Many were burned. Paul says it was over 2,000. Children and old ones mostly. If he's right, and he usually is, then I was very lucky indeed. Still, that's a great many friends to lose. Some went back today, more than on other days. They cannot live without a permanent home, even if it isn't theirs. They cannot live without a regular supply of food, even if they're just being fed. They cannot live without safety, even if it's a prison. They cannot raise their families, they tell me, while hiding in the jungle. They tell me that I don't understand that some people must have security, but I do understand it. Some people must have the blues. But few have fallen so far. Most of us stay, for though we are tired and hunted and very often frightened, we are free, and we are growing. John William Steakley, Jr. was born in 1951 in Cleburne, Texas. Died on November 27, 2010.